Well, hello, and welcome to our presentation for this great exhibit, Places and Spaces, Mapping Science. My name's Tim Utter, and I'm the co-host of this exhibit along with Rebecca Hill. We're really excited to have this exhibit here. It's really amazing and beautiful, and I'm sure you'll feel the same way when you get a chance to look at it. And just a little bit of background on how the exhibit got here. Kate Saylor at Health Sciences Libraries let Rebecca Hill know about this, and she contacted me, and that was about a year ago, and so it's taken a good year to organize it and bring it to fruition here, thanks to the help of Katy and lots of work and communication with her. And then I'd also like to thank Rebecca Dunkel, who approved this and helped it along the way and provided support. And then the staff here, Tim Archer, Mary Morris, and Kirsten Nealance, who helped to install it. And Gary Muntz for providing continuous IT support for it. So today we're really honored to have Katy, the curator of the exhibit, here. Dr. Börner is the Victor H. Young Professor of Information Science, School of Library and Information Science at Indiana University. And also Dr. Mark Newman. He's the Paul Dirac Collegiate Professor of Physics, Department of Physics, and Center for the Study of Complex Systems here at the University of Michigan. And Mark is, one of his maps is here in the exhibit, and then he's also co-author of the Atlas of the Real World, one of my favorite atlases. So we'll have this out on Exhibit 2 for you to view. We have 2 or 3 copies in the collection. And then we also have a copy of Katy's work that goes with the exhibit, the Atlas of Science. So without further ado, here's Dr. Katy Börner.
Thank you, Tim, and thanks to all of you. It's a real pleasure to be back here at the University of Michigan, and it's really beautiful to see the exhibit in its new environment. So every single venue has a different floor plan, has a different way of displaying the maps, has a different way to interrelating the maps to its environment, and I think it works beautifully here. I wanted to know how many of you had seen a map of science before. Can you raise your arm? All right, we are getting there. It's very nice. So when we started this exhibit, all we wanted to do is to find a way to show the general public, but also other researchers and industry and science policymakers, and maybe also children, how beautiful science is. And we also wanted to show them the structure and dynamics of science, and we wanted to render it in a way that speaks to them. And so this all was discussed over a breakfast in 2004 with some of my favorite colleagues' friends. And we thought, well, how do we best communicate the beauty, structure, and dynamics of science to a very general audience? And so we had this great idea over that brunch to just create an exhibit. And it sounded rather simple. You just print a bunch of maps, and you frame them, and you put them on the wall. And I can only tell those of you which want to do this, yes, please do it, but try to be tenured before you try to do this. It's actually quite an effort, and it's like a big black hole. So whatever you have in terms of money, you just put in there, it dissolves somehow magically. So you need a lot of good sponsors for this. And fortunately, so far, we have been very, very lucky and actually get this. The other piece which came quickly obvious was that we can't just photograph science. We actually have to construct the scientific space and how to do this best. And there's a lot of research now revolving around how to create the best locally and globally correct and persistent base map of science, and how to evolve those base maps of science over time so that you can use them just like geographic maps to display other data overlays. And so we started in the very beginning with kind of just looking at a timeline of mapping science work. And you see here, we started in 1934 with some of the first hand-drawn sketches and up to 2007. And if you zoom in there in just one of those many panels, you see that there are algorithms on the top and maybe I can use this here. So there are algorithms which come into existence. Then these algorithms get used to create certain types of visualizations. Then tools come into existence, which can then be used by a much more general audience to create maps. And then people publish a ton of books about what they learned and how to actually do it right. And so these kind of developments, it's very interesting to see that in the very early beginnings, all of the maps were hand-drawn. Later on, they were plotted. There were no screen grabs available yet. Then first very rudimentary screen captures, first interactivity also, first 3D visualizations, first fly-throughs through information spaces. Up to then in 2007, we really had an explosion of different works. So I actually would have a hard time to now continue this timeline because of all this work which has been happening since then. And then there are different types of maps. There are individual level maps, there are local maps, there are global maps, there are mixture maps. There are different types of data which you might like to represent. So there might be temporal data, topical data, geographic data, network data, answering when, where, what, and with whom questions, and more also models of science dynamics which answer why questions ultimately. Going on in time, we had, again, this great idea. We just take printouts of maps, we frame them, and we hang them. And here you see the very first installation at the American Geographers Conference in Denver, Colorado in 2005. And the map makers were very proud, so they tried to clean it up, and it was a very touching moment. And it all still fit in normal kind of things so that we could move it around from one place to the next, etc. It still fit in one crate, and actually this particular installation is currently a permanent exhibit at the National Science Foundation. So everything was very manageable still. In the meantime, we have added a number of more interactive elements. There is the illuminated diagram display, which combines the interactivity of screens, low resolution, much lower resolution screens or projectors, with the much higher resolution of printed maps. So you have these transparent overlays on top of the illumination patterns caused by these screens. And then it should be a touch panel, but unfortunately the touch panel broke on the way here. It will be replaced in 2 weeks, so please come back to experience the high quality touch panel. But then you can select different people, Nobel laureates in this particular case, but also different topics, and you will see them highlight in the map of the world where this research is conducted, but also in the map of science, what areas of science are working on sustainability research. And at the same time, you can enter keywords. You might be interested in a specific type of cancer, so you can type in the keyword using a touch panel keyboard. And you will see where on the planet and where in the world of science people are working on that topic. We also have a lot more crates now. And some people fall in love with the exhibit, and they see this little cute flyer and they think, yeah, that is great. Let's get this exhibit to come here. But then this stuff arrives in front of their door, and you actually become very familiar with different ramp heights for delivering those crates and different ways of pulling pallets, and it's a very different world. So again, get your tenure first, but then start an exhibit. I think it's a great way to actually get science to many different areas of science and outside of our ivory towers. As part of this exhibit, every year we have a call for maps, which invites anybody to submit maps. This year's call was for visual interfaces to digital libraries. And so we got a lot of entries from librarians, which was amazing to see, very insightful submissions. This is last year's iteration, which arrived at some point in our offices, and then it piles up. These offices are not made for 10 large-scale maps. And then it goes very quickly into crates, and this is Michael Stamper, the co-curator of the exhibit, and Samantha Hale, my assistant, and they are instrumental for actually getting this exhibit to go to different places. And then the exhibit goes to different places, and again, here it's on display at the Stanford University, and it looks different at every single venue, so I love to take photos because it really also reflects the institution itself. It also is on the railroad tracks, at least in Germany. If you have a train station, this is a great way to get a lot of science to a lot of people. Bloomington, Indiana, where I'm currently at, doesn't have a train station. Problem, can't get science to arrive in front of their main station. I should mention briefly that there's a lot of software development and data curation behind those maps, even though you see only the visual results of a lot of data analysis and visualization. There is extensive curation, there's extensive software development and implementation going on. And these are just some of the tools which we have been collaborating on. The Network Workbench project, Santiago Schnell, who is here in the audience, also was one of the main key PIs on. And there are other tools which we are developing in collaboration with other scientists. But now to the maps. So you might have seen this exhibit is a 10-year, 10-iteration effort. The first 3 iterations are on the power of maps, the power of reference systems, and the power of forecasts. Then follow 6 iterations which try to make these maps relevant to different stakeholders, to commercial decision makers, to scholars, to science policy makers, to children, to scholars, to libraries, and to the general audience. And then there's, at the very end, is one last iteration is on how to tell lies with science maps. We wanted that everybody understand how much you can actually get in trouble if you don't select the good data set, the best data set, or you do a wrong sampling, or a wrong analysis, or different parameter values which you shouldn't have used. This first iteration really aims to show the power of maps to help us understand, navigate, and manage both physical places and abstract knowledge spaces. And as you might know, the first maps of our planet were not perfectly correct, and you will see this in a second. But still, cartographic maps have been guided mankind's explorations for centuries. And we believe that these maps of science can also help you to get a holistic view of a data set so that you don't use the wrong one, so that you get more information on how to navigate to valuable nuggets of information, so that you can kind of find your own place in science, which is relevant also for children, and also to discover new worlds, but also to know where the monsters are, where you should kind of try to make sure that your PhD students don't go there. So let's look at some of those early maps. And again, these maps were incredibly helpful already, even though they look very different from what we now know as supposed to be the true shape of our world. Just 300 years back in time, we had still uncompleted coastlines, for instance, for Australia. And I sometimes wish that some of the new science map makers were so honest to just not draw the boundary if they don't know it. I think that would be a good way of doing it. And you also see California is still an island. And there are some other missing elements here. And you could very easily, in today's time and age, just put a cloud on top of an area which you don't have data for or not good enough data. And I think this could be a good visual language to use. So then the question becomes, how would a map of science look like and what metaphors might work best? And actually the first iteration uses 6 very different metaphors to display science. And the exhibit doesn't claim that any of those are correct. Instead, we would like to inspire a discussion about what metaphors might be best to represent science. One of the maps shown uses a subway metaphor by Keith Nesbitt, and he, as a PhD student, had a very hard time to communicate to his advisor what his PhD thesis was all about. And he tried this for a while, and then at the end he just kind of gave up, and on his way home, on his sad way home, he saw a tube map, and he thought, oh, I can represent all the many lines of thought which go through my thesis as a tube map. And his advisor, Peter Eads, in Australia, he's actually a big fan of tube maps. And so Dr. Keith Nesbitt successfully got his PhD, and actually his PhD thesis and also the atlas would have several of those lines of thought highlighted, kind of explaining what they are and why they have these connecting points and why they go in parallel for a while with some other lines. Andrei Skupin, a cartographer, he started to use geospatial information systems to render his own area of geography. So he took the abstract from 10 years of the Geographers Annual Conference, and he started to map it out. And here, mountains represent the more coherent areas of science, and they are labeled automatically using stop wording and stemming. So you see women studies, migration studies, population studies, GIS, water studies, etc., as some of the main areas of research. You also see that those close by areas are more related to each other. So what is going on here is that Andrei Skupin used a self-organizing map to train for these many abstracts which went into the generation of this map. Then you have areas which are homogeneous and represent those mountains here. And then you also have this valley over on the other side. And the question becomes, is this the valley of the lost and confused? Or is it a valley where you have the sediments from the surrounding mountains washed down and actually create a very fertile, fruitful environment for future work? And what you should probably do is to fold in the more recent data and to see what happened to researchers which used to operate here or works which were started in here. Did they create their own mountains? Did they climb up the mountains? All these things can now be answered because we have much more richer and more comprehensive digital data than ever before. This, in 2005, was the most comprehensive map of science ever created. I invite you to also read the fine print which surrounds these map areas. Kevin Boyack and Dick Clavens, the map makers here, they used a force-directed placement algorithm to place those documents which are similar in terms of their citation relations closer in space and those which are dissimilar farther away. This is a non-deterministic layout algorithm, so every single run will give you a slightly different layout, but the general structure stays the same. They then decided to rotate and mirror the map in a way that mathematics, as the maybe most theoretical and purist science, is up here. And then as you go down this ring of science, you pass through physics and chemistry and the biological sciences and the biomedical sciences via neurology, neuroscience, back in psychiatry, and then there's this interesting appendix to law, and then via computer science back to mathematics. And if you have a base map like this, you can then overlay other data sets such as nanotechnology, proteomics, pharmacogenomics, and you can also start to map life trajectories. You can take your own EndNote data file and you know which is your first publication, make a dot, next publication, make a dot, connected via a line. So you can really connect trajectories of different researchers or research teams or entire universities this way. So these domain maps of abstract semantic spaces, and they aim to serve today's explorers of science and technology, I would add. And they have been used and they are used to identify objectively major areas of research, emerging research areas, complementary skills, but also competition which might exist there and which you might like to monitor. And they also give you more holistic understanding of science as it evolves today. Typically, these maps in 2005, they were generated by those which had the money and the funding to actually create those. Today, we actually now have a number of tools where almost anybody can create their own science maps. So there's a huge difference in those 5 years. The next iteration of the map, of the exhibit, is on the power of reference systems. Many different sciences have created different types of reference systems so that they can take better care of their own data, that they can find data, that they communicate the structure of different data sets to a larger audience. And we wanted to understand how many dimensions does it take to depict science. I think you all are familiar with the periodic table. There were many different ideas of how to organize those elements before this one came into existence. The astronomical reference systems, they can actually, using this system, point to any segment in the sky and retrieve any photograph, any data sets, any simulation result, anything that has been recorded with this particular in this particular sector. Wouldn't it be nice to have something similar to this for science? And you could argue, well, we have the Library of Congress classification system. We can use this to uniquely identify books and papers, etc. But what about students? What about data sets? What about resources? What about instruments? All those are very hard to still identify. So coming back to the science maps, how many dimensions do you need? This is very early work by Eugene Garfield and his colleagues in '64. Back then they wanted to write the history of science by automatic means. So they designed these so-called historiographs, which are organized in time from the early time to the recent time. And then each dot represents a paper labeled by first author and the year. And you can then see how these different papers provide input to each other. And here in this particular case, we have Watson and Crick's DNA structure paper here, and all the work which was instrumental for getting this one insight and this one paper published. And then down here, you have the same paper and all the work which actually follows up on it and advances it. We then had historians of science look at these graphs and ask them if this is a correct reflection of the scientific advancement which was going on. And the answer was that whatever is in the paper record is represented here, but the love and hatred which is also going on in science might not be perfectly reflected. In another work, we tried to visualize the entire US patent classification hierarchy. This is a very, very extensive hierarchy of 150,000 classes up to 13 levels deep. All we managed to do here is to plot the first 3 levels of the hierarchy. And we actually had to plot them in neat columns, because if you just plot them in 6pt type font and you overplot them, then you need like 10 meters of space, 30 feet, to just plot the entire thing. This is how big this thing is. And there are librarians which try to optimize this hierarchy to fit the incoming stream of data. What a task. And we thought it would be really interesting to have a reference system. Here just the carpet of those classifications only to the 3rd level. And then you could actually highlight those classes in which Apple or IBM has a patent. So you would immediately see who has what holdings in what area. But you can also pull out a patent on the left on Gore-Tex, and you would see how is it cited. Or you pull out the patent on gold nanoshells, and you see what it cites in the existing set of patents. And you can zoom in here, and you see that you can actually read those labels. And in the printouts, you can as well, but you can see it's there for the entire map. And you can zoom into these enlargements here, and you can actually show what kind of patents are in what category and in how far they fit or don't fit in this category. So here you have 4 patents sticking out, in this case meaning that they are different from the rest of the other patents. And now as a patent librarian, you could go in and see why they are so different, and maybe you need to reclassify. Or maybe it is justified to have them in there. Another map of Richard Clavens and of Dick Clavens and Kevin Boyack, here representing the currently active research domains, active in terms of very young citation references. So those papers which have a lot of very recent papers that they cite are darker represented here. And you see that those areas which live or which use a lot of ePrint archives, they will have a lot of those darker area size coded notes, whereas some of the more arts and humanities areas will look a little different. 3rd iteration, and I think I have to speed up here, is the power of forecasts. So the question is, can you forecast science, and to what degree? You might have seen some of the visualizations of hurricanes, named storms and hurricanes. And imagine now a scientific revolution going over the landscape of science, destroying existing knowledge structures and making also space for new developments. Can we use these kind of metaphors which have been developed in other areas of science? Or here in a map by Michael Hamburger and his colleagues showing seismic hazards for different areas of the world. And obviously there are some areas which have very high resolution data, such as Japan, for instance, and other areas where you have barely any data. And the same will happen for science data. There are some scientific communities which have the resources to scan all the materials back in time, 100 years. And there are other areas of science which barely have any data. epidemic forecasting. What is the impact of where an idea starts, how far it spreads, and when it starts, and how infectious it is. So I think we can take a lot of good theory and algorithms developed in those areas and apply it to the study of science and diffusion patterns in science, be it people, career trajectories, or be it ideas. So some of the maps which you will see in that iteration is a map of a 50-year forecast done for a UK client by the Institute of the Future. And I'm not going to go into details here. They have quite a number of wildcards, but it's very interesting to look at this. Another work which is in the exhibit is 113 years of physical review with overlays of Nobel laureate predictions. And please ask me about this map and other maps, but I'm going to speed up so that I'm staying in my time. Another map which you might find interesting is a hypothetical drawing of how science might evolve from the first scientific idea growing outwards in kind of tube-like shapes for each area of science, adding on to the knowledge of science. And there are good years and there are bad years. We know that there are years in which you actually have wars happening, and in those years not much is built up. And then there are other years where you have stimulus funding and other parts happening. And so these kind of tree rings, which you see here, are going to be thicker. And then, of course, you also have monsters in science. Here, this is actually the very first map of science which shows a monster, here rendered as a void, as something unknown which we don't know. And I think that's the area where you should try to tell your students not to go to. And here really science is seen as scholarly bricklaying, as standing on the shoulders of others and adding to the repository of science, whereas all of us are actually operating on the crust of this weird-shaped objects, kind of knitting our nets. And typically what we do is to map the last 5 years, the last 5 tree rings, if you wish, of this landscape of science. And these areas of science, they push and pull on each other. This is one of the most comprehensive maps ever created, again by De Clavens and Kevin Boyack. And here you have 5 years of Thomson Reuters and Scopus Elsevier data. And you have major areas of science and how they're interrelated. It's a wraparound world, so whatever ends here actually starts here again. It was originally plotted on the surface of a globe and then flattened out as a Mercator projection. And you see the arts and humanities in here, but this is only the surface of this object which you just got to see. Next iteration was the first one which actually introduced these maps of science to different stakeholders, here economic decision making. And you have some old maps which are fascinating, and they are in the exhibit, and each map comes with a description. Please do read the descriptions. There's a lot of information on what these maps actually teach us. The development of the videotape recorders, the 50 different events in science and technology that had to happen in a certain sequence in order to result into one device which was widely used, not so much anymore. So what needs do economic decision makers have? What do they need to understand? And we selected work here, for instance, by Laszlo Barbasi and Ricardo Hausmann and Cesar Hidalgo, on the product space, the idea that if you are operating in the fringes of the product space, and the space here is created based on co-exporting of products from a country, so more often they are co-exported, the more stronger these products are connected, and you will see that there's a very strong kind of high technology core in the middle, and then there are kind of cotton and cereals in the fringes. And it's actually very hard for countries which specialize in the fringes to get into this high-tech core. You can get there, but it's very hard. Whereas for people which are in this much denser core, they have a much easier time to go from one product to the next. It's much closer by. We also thought in that particular exhibit we should have a happiness map. It's not all about money. It's also about health and education and well-being. Policy making. Here you have a map of download activity for different scholarly publications. So not just seeing who is citing whom, which is all happening in the scholarly environment, but also who is downloading what kind of documents will give you a much more comprehensive picture of the impact of science. And you will see that here you have a lot more in the biomedical sciences because there are lots of doctors in doctors' offices which might never write a scientific paper, but they are benefiting increasingly from the papers which are available via Medline and other services. You also see down here that the yellow arts and humanities are keeping are the core and interlinking the hardcore sciences surrounding them in blue. So there's a very important role which apparently, according to this data, the arts and humanities play. Another map which is in this iteration is one that shows feedback cycles in science. So here you see a map by the chemical research, so the Council for Chemical Research. They had an extremely well-compiled data set on spending and financing and research results in the chemical domain. And so they were able to identify and quantify that about 1 billion of federal funding is matched by chemical industry funding of about 5 billion, then leading to a chemical industry operating income of 10 billion, a lot of growth in GNP and jobs created, and then via the US economy back via taxes into more federal funding. And then you also see that there are delays in the science system. It takes a certain time to do research. It takes a certain time to do development. It takes a certain time to do product development. And so if you give any of us money today and you expect in 2 years a ripe product, it's not going to be realistic. So I think having this quantified and visualized is very important. And the submission which came to the exhibit was actually a PowerPoint slide, this particular slide, which had made it to Congress, so it was used in a hearing. And then we used, or we went through different iterations of the map until we finally settled to the map, which you see here in the exhibit. So these maps undergo quite a transformation to make them more understandable to a wider audience. The maps for scholars, which actually is debuting here, and I would like to use this opportunity to again thank our local exhibit hosts, Tim, which you have seen before me, but also Rebecca Hill and all their colleagues for doing an amazing job in putting this up. And I was more than pleased when I got their email asking me if it would be possible to display the exhibit here. And one of those many reasons is that some of the major map makers that exist currently are really researchers here at the University of Michigan. You have an amazing set of scholars here, and it's a real pleasure to visit here. In this iteration, you also have a map, first map by an arts and humanities scholar and the map shows several poems by Victorian poets, Robert Browning in blue and Charles Swinburne in red. So you see this listing here on this side, and they actually refer to each other. You also see a distribution of literary settings across time and space, plus the year of composition. And the map is used in research to then identify clusters of poems and gaps in the timeline, and also concentrations of certain research works in Italy, Greece, and also the Holy Land. And the students which have been working with John Walsh on this, they had a really hard time to figure out where to place poems that had a setting in heaven and hell. So that was a really interesting task they had to accomplish there. Another map which is in the exhibit is one by Lud Ledesdorff on the emergence of nanotechnology, how different types of journals play very different roles in the, at the birth, and then the kind of maturation and the establishment of different areas. So here you see data from 98 to 2003. And during the late 1990s, journals in the field of applied physics increasingly cite nanotechnology here in green. So you see these green dots. And you also see down here the betweenness centrality of such journals. So it increases hugely. So it actually starts to interconnect all of the relevant works And then in 2000, science, here in red, plays a very crucial role in the reorganization of the interdisciplinarity, because now other fields are joining this type of research effort. And then later on, nanotechnology takes over the lead from science. And ultimately, the influential American Chemical Society publishes Nano Letters, and this journal actually takes the lead in terms of the number of citations it attracts and the impact factor. So you see a very interesting change in this landscape at the journal level. Again, I hope you won't just enjoy the maps which come with the exhibit, but also some of the local maps. And the exhibit has been doing a phenomenal job so far of interconnecting different types of researchers, different ivory towers, different institutions, so not only the libraries to the researchers, but also the researchers to the general public, and the general public to the science policymakers, and so on. So I hope you will have the same effect here with having the exhibit at the University of Michigan. But at the same time, I hope also the local map makers enjoy each other and start to interact more. I would also like to mention that maps here are not only created for scholarly purposes, but also for very applied purposes. Like, for instance, Jeffrey Horn, who has the lower right map here, used map making in a very intelligent, creative way to support a P30 NIH grant application. And this grant was awarded, which is a nice success story by itself, and now finances a new nutrition obesity research center here at the University of Michigan. So these maps can help to not only pool teams together, but also communicate the strengths of those teams to external constituencies, and maybe even to make those teams work productively together across disciplinary boundaries and potentially also geospatial boundaries. Upcoming iterations. So the science maps as visual interface to digital libraries iteration, those maps have been decided and have been announced. And you might have seen some of the press going on around this. The next 3 years are hard. They are very difficult, I think, because we now are trying to get these science maps relevant for children. And children will be in the review team. So we have to really try hard there. And then also science forecasts for a general audience. That's, I think, a very hard one to deal with, but I think we will try for it. And then the final one, which I already mentioned. Last but not least, if you're now interested to learn more about those maps, contact the map makers. They're all very friendly, very fun people to hang out with. If you can't get a hold of them, contact us. We try to keep track of all these map makers, and we can connect you there. And also, if you want to follow us on Facebook, we just started this, so I'm new to this. I might not do everything right yet, but we do have a feed now up there, and you are welcome to see what's going on with the exhibit. Thank you all so much.